From the job site to the code book, this is a Pool Envy podcast, where licensed pool professionals speak up. Code, compliance, craftsmanship. Hosted by Jason Davies. Licensed across Wisconsin, Florida, and Texas. Your deep end starts now.
Before I start, this episode is general industry commentary. It is not legal advice, and it is not a case-specific opinion in any active matter. We hear the same phrases over and over in this industry. Our staff is trained. Our operator is certified. We have automated systems. We have a vendor. We've passed inspection. We are compliant. Those phrases sound reassuring. They sound organized. They sound professional. But none of them by themselves mean a place is safe. That is the point of this episode. One of the biggest problems in this industry is that compliance language often gets mistaken for real protection. A report exists. A checklist exists. A vendor exists. Somebody with a little more knowledge is involved. And everybody starts acting like the risk has been handled. Sometimes it has. Sometimes it absolutely has not. One of the clearest examples is the Marie Joseph case in Fall River, Massachusetts. In June of 2011, Marie Joseph drowned in a public pool. Her body remained undiscovered for about 2 days while the pool stayed open. Investigators later concluded that the water clarity in the deep end was so poor that the pool should have not been opened in the first place. And that is where this gets important. The public often assumes that when something like this happens, it must be because there was no rule. But that is not what this case showed. There were standards. There were people. There were layers of responsibility. What failed was not just the existence of rules. What failed was judgment, ownership, and the willingness to stop unacceptable conditions from becoming normal. The report described a chain of failure. Before opening, debris and dark residue was left in the deep end as the pool was filled. Staff talked about removing it first. They were told not to bother. The vacuum at the facility was not working. A replacement vacuum existed elsewhere. It was never brought over. So before the public ever entered the water, a basic physical problem was already being left unresolved. Then it got worse. The normal practice had been to start chlorinating and filtering the water promptly as the pool was filled. According to the report, those instructions were stopped. Staff were told not to add chlorine. Staff were told not to add chlorine and not to turn on the pump to filter the water. Staff objected. They said this was not the right approach. The request was refused. The water sat untreated. The water sat unfiltered. Algae developed. A returning maintenance supervisor later described the pool as pea soup green. This is not a story about no one knowing anything. This is a story about shallow authority colliding with poor judgment. And that is the part that the public actually doesn't see. Because this industry has a dangerous habit of treating exposure as expertise. Somebody has been around pools. Somebody passed a course. Somebody opened a facility before. Somebody knows the language. And pretty soon everybody gets presented as an expert. But familiarity is not expertise. Minimal exposure combined with weak supervision creates a very specific kind of failure. People know just enough to sound confident, but not when to recognize the conditions are truly unacceptable. Or worse, they do recognize it, but they are working inside a system that has trained them not to own the shutdown. That is where compliance starts drifting away from safety. And that is why I do not think the answer is simply make more people take a class. Training matters. Certification matters. Automation can help. Vendors can help. But training without authority becomes trivia. Authority without accountability becomes theater. And when those two combine, the public gets sold a picture of control that does not always exist. I've seen two versions of that language firsthand. We have a certified team. We have advanced technology. We have a maintenance agreement. We manage the operation in-house. All of that may be true, but those phrases still do not answer the real question. If the condition is wrong, who is actually prepared to recognize it, own it, and shut it down? That is the question that matters, because a lot of municipalities, hotels, and facilities do not always use vendors, certifications, or systems as a true safety function. Too often, these things become procedural insulation. Budget pressure remains. Opening pressure remains. Public optics remain. The report still gets written. the box still gets checked, and everyone gets to say that a qualified person was involved. But when the failure was preventable, you often discover something uncomfortable. Too many people touched the issue. Too few people owned it. That is the larger lesson. Compliance can exist without ownership. Certification can exist without vigilance. Automation can exist without judgment. A vendor can exist without intervention. An inspection can exist without escalation. And once you understand that, a lot of this industry starts making more sense. It explains why a place can say it is trained, certified, inspected, and automated, while obvious field conditions still look wrong, smell wrong, or remain unresolved. It explains why agencies point to other agencies. It explains why notes get written and files get closed. It explains why the public keeps getting told to trust the process, even when nobody seems willing to take responsibility for prevention. The Marie Joseph case also led to charges. There was more staffing, more water clarity checks, more direct oversight, and that matters because it shows the real lesson was not one bad moment. The real lesson was that poor conditions survived contact with multiple layers of oversight. So here's the takeaway. A safe pool is not created by paperwork, a certification card, a vendor invoice, or a reassuring email. Safety happens when someone with real judgment and real authority is willing to say, this condition is not acceptable, and we are not going to move forward like this. This is what the public deserves, and that is what the industry too often avoids. Because in a lot of facilities, everyone is presented as an expert right up until the moment a real decision has to be made. Then suddenly, no one seems to own the water. No one seems to own the shutdown. No one seems to own the risk. This is not just a training problem. This is a culture problem. And until the industry gets honest about the difference between compliance and ownership, we are going to keep seeing the same pattern under different names in different cities with different excuses.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and it is not site-specific engineering, code, or safety determination. All field conditions should be evaluated in context. Thanks for listening to the Pool Envy Podcast, where licensed pool professionals speak up. Hosted by Jason Davies, licensed across Wisconsin, Florida, and Texas. For more insights, subscribe and join us next time.